Hello and welcome to another episode of the Minor Issues Podcast. I'm Mark Thornton at the Mises Institute. Everybody agrees that money is of the utmost importance. You would think that every school child would have memorized the name of whoever invented money, but of course when that question is posed, it only brings forth blank stares. In the last episode of this podcast, in the short video at the end of Hayek, he states that money is a spontaneous institution. Some subscribers to the podcast ask, what the heck did that mean? And even though money is very old, the answer is both quite clear and vitally important for understanding everything in the modern world, not just Bitcoin. The answer also addresses our macroeconomic problems of today and even provides the answers. It's quite clear because Hayek says that language and the common law are also spontaneous institutions. Even though we don't have any newspaper clippings from the birth of money, because there were no newspapers or even written languages at the time, we do have some actual history to draw on and basic human logic. Some of the great scholars of all time have applied themselves to this question, and virtually all of them agree to the same basic answer. Money was discovered by some individuals as a way to get around the difficulties involved in barter exchange. In primitive societies, where goods are traded against other goods, kind of like trading baseball cards or purses or farm machinery without the use of money. Thinking ahead, some people back then realized that they could trade what they had for something they did not want if they knew they could trade it again with somebody else for something that they did want. That intermediate or go-between good acts as a medium or facilitator of exchange that ends up making all parties better off, where they had been previously stymied or limited by the limitations of barter. Other people then might catch on to this innovation and start gravitating to accepting the go-between good on a regular basis, knowing that they can retrade it for what they want. Now, Hayek speaks of a great scholarly tradition that labels this process spontaneous because nobody planned it, designed it, or controlled it. It emerged spontaneously from individuals trying to find ways to make themselves better off, and it's hard to even imagine how a government bureaucrat would come up with such a scheme or system. Indeed, we know that government leaders of various sorts failed to even recognize that trade is a mutually advantaged act for really thousands of years. In fact, it's not until Aristotle that we have a lasting written record that money is a useful and beneficial thing. But the use of money begins long before Aristotle in the Stone Age, where certain food or other commodities were used as a medium of exchange within the emerging social communities. In contrast, the fable of the origin of money is that some great leader or king declared something to be money, and everybody recognizing the king's greatness just consented and began practicing the use of this money. Fables attempt to explain origins in the absence of facts and information, especially from times in which there is limited language, writing, and historical artifacts. The money fable suffers from the fact that money must have already existed to some extent. Money of some sort is a prerequisite for the development of any significant trade, economic development, specialization in the division of labor, etc. These are features of society that are necessary to achieve a social level that could support or have any need for any type of central leadership or king. The earliest society probably adopted a core good, such as lentils or dates or corn, as such a medium. Scholars have speculated that prominent mediums had certain properties, such as not being easily perishable, such as dates, or were easily divisible, such as lentils and corn, or were maybe high value relative to weight, such as salt. As societies passed into the Bronze Age, metals soon began to dominate this evolutionary or spontaneous process of money development because metals had all of the best properties. Ore and scrap pieces of metal were forged by metal workers into recognizable pieces, and eventually mints began minting coins, and money went global along with trade. One of the first theoretical reconstructions of the origin of money comes to us from Richard Cantillon, in which he demonstrates that money was first a valued commodity that was produced at an economic cost, and that money's use dates back past the earliest years of the Bible. According to Cantillon, with the possible exception of noting that public mints set standards of weight and purity, everything about the business of money is positioned within the economic context, with gold and silver coins winning the evolutionary economic contest. Quote, gold and silver alone are of small volume, equal quality, easily transported, divisible without loss, convenient to keep. Brilliant articles are made from them, and they are almost eternally durable. Everyone who has used other articles for money returns them as soon as they can get enough for exchange. Looking back at history, Cantillon finds that money is dominated by economic considerations, and that when governments get involved and try to intervene, they create, quote, imaginary values, which serve no purpose and come to no good. Founder of the Austrian school, Karl Menger, published in 1882, was the innovative theorist credited with the founding of the Austrian school, and he canvassed the existing hypotheses of the origin of money and found them all insufficient to explain the conceptual and factual origin of money and its ultimate choice of commodity as money. For Menger, the answers center on the different degrees of saleability of goods, which can only be determined by individuals in markets. He conceded that many centuries after these questions were answered, that yes, money did have the, quote, consent of the people and might even be usefully regulated by the state. Economist Richard Radford gives us an example of the origin of money in a natural experiment, which is a situation in which economic conditions are so constrained that it reminds scholars of a laboratory experiment. Here, World War II prisoner of war camps in Germany saw the spontaneous emergence of cigarettes as a medium of exchange. American prisoners received Red Cross packages that contained soap, chocolate, toothpaste, socks, etc., and cigarettes. Cigarettes emerged spontaneously as money, with other goods being traded in cigarette prices and even cigarette loans. However, a corollary of the state's long-standing interest in money to control it, to manipulate it in order to secretly drain economic sustenance from the productive classes is the reemergence of that fable that the state originated or created money to help the people. This fairy tale has gained credence in recent years and now flourishes amongst Marxist scholars and monetary theorists, MMT. These writers agitate for the idea that the state created money through tax and credit schemes or as public works. Of course, this is a thinly veiled apology for more money printing and radical spending in the state's power and bloodlust sprees. For MMT, if the state created money and conferred its benefits on society, then surely it is sovereign to print and spend for its own agenda. Now, fortunately, my colleague here at the Mises Institute has organized an anti-MMT research project to fight this surprisingly new trend in economics. In addition to his own writings and public appearances, he has organized research sessions at the Austrian Economics Research Conference and is now editing a book of new critiques of MMT. I have just finished reading his own latest findings, and he shows that MMT's historical origin of money theory as a byproduct of the state is seriously flawed, and that money already existed before the state-sponsored money. You'll definitely want to get a copy of this book when it's published. I don't want to finish here without revisiting the policy-relevant issues. 1. Our problems with money and our macroeconomic maladies are the result of government intervention in money. This includes not just price inflation and dollar debasement, but also runaway government spending, business cycles, and a reverse Robin Hood effect on the distribution of wealth. 2. Monetary reform, as Hayek suggested last episode, must always not forget that it must involve a return to real commodity money. And B, a removal of all aspects of government control and intervention into the monetary sphere of life.